Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Have you ever thought where your thoughts come from? I had an experience just recently where I'd put my caravan in to be serviced, and we were about to go away on holidays, and the day before we were to leave, I was just overwhelmed with this impression that I needed to check the wheel nuts on my caravan. And that evening it was so strong that I took my spanner set and I left it down by my back door so that I wouldn't forget to do it in the morning. And when I went out in the morning, all the bolts that hold the wheels on the wheel nuts could be tightened about half a turn. Now, I've been towing trailers and driving for over 50 years actually, and never before had I been impressed to go and check the wheel nuts. But on this particular time, I was, and it was important. It was fortunate that I did. So where did those thoughts come from? I remember another incident that I was thinking about just before coming on air, and this occurred in Hobart, and there's an intersection between Davey Street, which comes down a hill, and Sandy Bay Road, a major road that comes out of the suburb, and they meet at an intersection, and on the corner of this intersection is a large government building. Now, I was coming down the hill, heading north down Davey Street. It was an evening. I was coming into Hobart. It was a rainy night, and I had this distinct impression to slow down. Now, I was doing under the 60 kilometres an hour, which was the speed limit at the time, and there was a green light at the intersection. And I was thinking, I want to catch that light. But this impression to slow down was just so strong, and I did. I slowed down a little bit. And just as I got to that intersection, a blue Datsun sports car came through the red light and actually clipped the front bumper bar of the car that I was driving and spun me a little bit. But another fraction of a second earlier, if I had have been a fraction of a second earlier, that sports car would have slammed right into the side of me. So where did that thought come from that really impressed me to slow down? Where did those thoughts come from? Another situation, as I've been a keen interest in history, is when we think back to Joan of Arc in the times there in the Middle Ages, she was appointed the command of the French army. Now here we have a young woman, 18 years of age, in a period of culture where women were considered more or less a chattel of their husband. I mean, when we think about it even today, it's only just over 100 years that women have been allowed to vote in many Western countries. So when we think about the situation of a young woman being appointed to the head of the French army, why did that happen? Now, we understand from the court records and of her trial and the historical records that what happened was she asked to see the Dauphin, the son of the King of France who hadn't yet been crowned, and when she saw him and asked for an interview, she was able to tell him what he had prayed to God, his prayer to God. So she said that God had revealed to her what the prayer was. And as a result, the king was impressed and he put her in charge of the army. And of course, she lifted the siege of Orleans, and the king was allowed to go and be crowned. And there are many amazing accounts in in history? Where did these thoughts come from? Some time ago, I did some research into the crimes that were committed under the influence of alcohol. And there are some pretty horrendous crimes that have been committed when people have been under the influence of alcohol. And I really don't want to talk about them. You really just don't want to know the details. But where did the thoughts come from for people to do those gruesome things? And of course, many people do really gruesome things that aren't under the influence of alcohol. But there are other people that do really, really good things. One of the arguments that that scientists sometimes put up who don't believe in God is that they say, well, we want to believe in rational. We want to teach children to just think rationally, to think about the data, to examine the evidence. We don't want children learning that there was Adam and Eve in a garden, and there was a serpent, and there was a flood with a boat, and all the animals went on it. We want them to learn facts. When we look at the facts, though, the facts of science are that we have no idea how the universe formed. We talk about the Big Bang, but there's really no known process where energy can be converted into matter without forming equal amounts of antimatter. And when we look out in the universe, as we've discussed in earlier programs, it's mainly matter. It's not antimatter out there. When we look at the structure of DNA and the codes there, and scientists at universities that are doing the research in these areas still don't have a mechanism for how the DNA code for new body parts can form, because the structures required in the code to produce the new body parts are so complex. But yet our minds can understand the mathematics of physics. Our minds can understand the complexity of DNA. We've been able to make these discoveries and understand it. And at the moment, I'm talking here to you in English, and presumably most of you listening to this program can understand what I'm saying, because I'm communicating to you. I'm making sounds, but these sounds are really a code, and your mind is interpreting this code, and it's creating pictures for you in your mind, and we're communicating. And these thought processes are here. So we have a range of thought processes. So let's have a look at those. We have thought processes that have warned us of danger. We have thought processes that have motivated people to do really bad things. We have thought processes that have enabled us to understand the laws of mathematics and discover the laws of physics and chemistry and biology. And we can communicate with one another. We've developed language. So one of the important aspects of trying to understand how we came to be, when people talk about evolution and we want people to believe that all these random chemical reactions produce the amazing complexity in nature, you need to understand that these chemical reactions work with just matter. Where did the mind come from? And where did the thoughts come from? Where did they originate? And really there's no explanation. But as I just read the news and look around, and I see the contrast between all the bad things that we're hearing about on the news, and then I read about all the really good things that people are doing and the charities. I was at a meeting last night of car club enthusiasts, and they were talking about how we can raise some money to do good things for charities, to support the rescue helicopter and things like this. So there's this real contrast that we see out there. And, of course, this is exactly what the Bible describes. The Bible describes how there is a loving God who created us for fellowship with him, who created us with minds that can interact with his mind. But it also talks about how there was a creator being who became very jealous of God and his relationships and the way his relationships with his creation, and has in a way set out to destroy that creation. And that's, of course, the story of Satan. And when you come to think about it, if there was a spiritual being and he wanted to destroy God's creation, us, how would you do it? If you were a spiritual being and you could affect the mind. And this brings me to the thought when I look at some of the thoughts that are put on the websites when people are discussing the creation evolution debate and the accusations that are made against Christians and the assertions against Christians that they're putting these bad ideas into children's head, that there is a God, but there's also a judgment, and that we're accountable to God. People are saying that these are really, really not good ideas for children. But really, if we remove all these sense of limitations and barriers, we see what happens in society. We see the areas of cities where there is no law and order, and it's just not safe to go there, and the people are fighting amongst themselves. The bad people are fighting amongst themselves. So as I've thought about these things, where thought has come from, and I guess there are many stories that I could relate to as well. I can remember servicing my car one time. My wife had gone ahead to her parents, and I was preparing our old car for a long trip to meet her. And while under the car, I had the most distinct impression I need to get out from under the car. And as I got out from under the car, it rolled off the jack. Now, I know people say, well, that was a silly thing to do. Well, I admit that. But I had that impression at that time. And I believe as I meet people and talk to people and they say, well, I haven't experienced God. My experience with God is that I've felt God impress my mind. I've had these thoughts that come in. And so as I read the Bible, I can read the accounts of other people who had experiences with God. God impressed their minds, and I can relate to that. I can relate to their experiences, to their answers to prayer. And of course, there's some amazing history and amazing prophecies in the Bible as well, as we think of King Nebuchadnezzar, who built the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon and conquered all the countries around where he was. He was a brilliant strategist and a military strategist, and his Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the beautiful city and surrounds that he built for his wife, were certainly listed as one of the seven wonders of the ancient world by Herodotus, the Greek historian. And when we think of the account in the Bible of the young Jewish noble Daniel, who was taken into his court, and how Nebuchadnezzar was really troubled by a dream, and none of his wise men could tell him what the dream meant, because Nebuchadnezzar said, well, for me to genuinely know that you can tell me what the dream means, I want you to tell me what I dreamt. And sort of like the Dauphin of France asked Joan of Arc what he had prayed. And just as God obviously revealed to Joan of Arc, God revealed to Daniel what Nebuchadnezzar had dreamed. And it was an amazing dream because Nebuchadnezzar essentially saw the history of that part of the world was unfolded to him up to the time when God will return to this earth, and that's going to be a very exciting time. So here we have this direct evidence of God interacting with men. Now, when this comes to the creation evolution debate, as I've been studying this for over 40 years now and looking at the evidence for creation, I've been just so impressed that when we look at even the universe, to me, the evidence is there that the universe is young. Why are we seeing the amazing phenomena that we see when we observe through our telescopes? Why are they happening on our timescale? Just the other day in the paper, it was revealed they've discovered a really large dinosaur footprint in South America, I think it was. But why is it so close to the surface? Why are these things there now? Why haven't they eroded away? Why are the remains of the dinosaurs still there? Why are we finding, for example, blood tissue and soft tissue in the remains of dinosaurs now? All these things are pointing to me that life on Earth is very young. The extinctions that occurred are very recent. It fits the flood timing. And of course, there are many, many other scientists who recognise this and are pointing it out. But it's very difficult for them to get their work published. Recently, Stephen Meyer put out a book, Darwin's Doubt. And if you look it up on Amazon, Darwin's Doubt, look it up on Amazon.com, you'll see that there are, I think it's over 700 reviews of the book now. And essentially he points out the evidence that the fossil record is not a record of evolution. The fossil record doesn't support Darwin's theory of evolution. In the book, In 6 Days, that we've been talking about and going through, and again, that is, you can look up these chapters if you Google creation.com, and when you go to the creation.com website, if you do a search on In 6 Days, you'll come up with the individual chapters of the arguments that these scientists put forward. In our last program, we talked about the brilliant French mathematician Marcel Paul Schutzenberger, who pointed out that it was mathematically impossible for the DNA code to form by chance and create new organisms. Another brilliant mathematician who points out the same thing is Dr. Andrew McIntosh. Now, he holds a DSc, Doctor of Science, which is a higher degree than a PhD. He holds a DSc in mathematics from the University of Wales, and he is at the University of Leeds there, a professor in mathematics there. And he is an expert on flight, the mathematics of flight, and also the mathematics of thermodynamics of jet engines. But he has studied flight in detail of birds and butterflies and insects, and he has quite an extensive chapter looking at the design in flight and the design in feathers and the impossibility of these structures arising by chance. He's also an expert in information theory and has published papers showing that information cannot arise by chance. It requires intelligent thought process. It requires a mind. So his is an amazing chapter there. Another scientist who's a creationist and contributed is Dr. Angela Myers. She holds a PhD in horticultural science from the University of Sydney. And she's an expert in the area of flowering plants, and she points out and discusses some of the amazing characteristics of flowering plants and how they're coordinated to factors of temperature and day length and light and the various hormone chemicals that are in plants that control their reactions. Now, all these hormones are produced by chemical reactions that are controlled by specific enzymes. And these enzymes have particular structures that they just don't form by normal chemistry. They only form in special factories that are present in biological cells. So this whole system can just not arise by random processes. It requires brilliant, intelligent design to put these factors together. Another scientist who rejects evolution is Dr. Stephen Grocott. He's the General Manager for R&D, Research and Development for Southern Petroleum, and holds a PhD in chemistry from the University of Western Australia. And he goes through and again discusses the processes that would be involved in the origin of life, and points out again from our laws of chemistry that it's impossible for non-living molecules to form the first living cell. So again, he sets out much of the chemistry there and shows how, in actual fact, the Bible and the health laws in the Bible very much fit our current laws of knowledge of chemistry and in particular health. And so many people think that the Bible was written by people who were very primitive, but when we see the laws, the moral laws that were introduced, indeed they have formed the foundation of Western society, which arguably has been the most successful form of society at the present time. And these laws and for washing and health and so forth, we know fit in with best practice now today for keeping health. Another scientist who rejected evolution, who writes in this book, is John Marcus. Now, he holds a PhD in biological chemistry from the University of Michigan. And at the time that he wrote the chapter, he was working in a research centre at the University of Queensland in Australia. Now, Dr. Marcus, with his expertise in biological chemistry, sets out a very, very detailed article about how the molecules that are involved in living processes could not arise by chance. He looks at the calculations in detail, he sets it out, he shows the probability. And even if the Earth was billions and billions of years old, there would not be enough time for random processes to produce even the simplest of biological molecules. His chapter is very, very well written, and I would recommend that anyone listening who is studying biology or zoology at university, that again you go on and Google the creation.com website or Creation Ministries International, and when you get on that website, do a search for In 6 Days, and when the chapters come up, it'll be the first link that comes up when you do a search for In 6 Days. Scroll down until you come to John P. Marcus. His chapter is brilliant on the biochemistry, explaining the biochemistry of life and why it is absolutely impossible for random processes to produce the molecules that construct the living organisms. Another scientist who rejects evolution is Dr. Nancy Darrell, and she holds a PhD in botany from the University of Wales. Her chapter again is quite is quite detailed in its assessment of the science of DNA and the replication of DNA. And she looks at the claims that evolutionists make that gene replication can produce new organisms and this sort of thing. And she very clearly and succinctly points out how this reasoning doesn't work. These sort of processes can't produce the new and complex amounts of information that are required in a new organism. Matter of fact, she has a detailed rebuttal of the arguments that Richard Dawkins puts out in The Blind Watchmaker. So that's another very important chapter that I would recommend that you look up, Nancy Darrell, Dr. Nancy Darrell's chapter. And again, of course, this material you can buy the book in 6 days at bookshops such as Koorong or on Amazon or any of the internet book distributors in 6 days, Why 50 Scientists Choose to Believe in Creation. Or again, you can download the chapters for free on creation.com. My book, Evolution Impossible, summarises a lot of these arguments as well. And again, that's available on Amazon.com. And if you look up Evolution Impossible and you scroll down, you can see the sort of arguments as people have reviewed the book. And people have then posted comments on the reviews, and you can see the intensity of the arguments over creation versus evolution. But one of the important points that I'd like to make is that a lot of times, particularly evolutionists, are making assertions that this is the case, or that this happens, or that this is wrong. It's very important to have good data. And one of the things that has come out in the book in 6 days is that these scientists have put out the data why evolution is impossible. They've referenced it to the peer-reviewed literature. The same with the book Evolution Impossible. So it's important to understand that there is really, really good data now that shows that evolution is absolutely impossible. And we need to remember again that evolution cannot explain the mind. It cannot explain the thoughts. It cannot explain those impressions that we get that save us at times. Well, thank you for listening today. You've been listening to Faith and Science, and I'm Dr. John Ashton. Bye for now.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.